Welcome, 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 everyone, to Leadership and Diversity in Medicine. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending upon where you're at and whoever is watching. This week, we have as our guest Dr. Kamilah Marie Williams. She's a board-certified family medicine physician with a passion for holistic medicine. She graduated from medical school in 2003 and served as chief resident before finishing residency in 2006. She was challenged with weight loss resistance and personal health problems and was struck by how many other people had similar issues. So she decided to start using this system of what she called a ketogenic lifestyle. And she lost 30 pounds and maintained that weight loss by embracing various wellness practices. So I wanted to share it with others. And now her stated purpose is to provide her tribe with a foundation of health literacy on which to rebuild their temples. She believes that true health and wellness encompass spiritual, physical, emotional, relational, and financial well-being. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Dr. Kamilah Williams. Hello, Dr. Williams.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you for asking.
Good. So why don't you tell me about your current work situation and where you are at in your career?
So it's interesting. I've had what I call sort of whiplash of a career over the last 3 months. For 18 years, I practiced family medicine. The first 3 years of that was my residency. So for about 15 years, I practiced outpatient family medicine. And due to my own multiple reasons, but especially just needing a change, needing something different, going through COVID, multiple things. I decided to leave my job and pursue my passion of, health and wellness and working with people and teaching them how to really care for their temples, as you mentioned. So now I work for a startup company helping with weight loss consultations that fits in my passion as a foundation. And then I'm building my own coaching program to help other women, particularly single women and moms, learn how to really nourish their bodies.
Fantastic. Tell me more about the coaching program, if you don't mind.
Well, it's new. It'll be launching this summer. I'm currently working on it and getting all the details down. But essentially, as you mentioned, I have had a lot of issues with my weight. And as you probably are familiar with, we have a lot of stress in medicine. And so it added some pounds over the years. I also had a baby 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And that didn't help the weight gain. And despite being pretty active and being someone that did a half marathon and doing a cycling event where I rode 50 miles and, so I was pretty active. I did yoga when I was pregnant. I did, spinning when I was pregnant. So this wasn't a thing where I wasn't moving. It was definitely a nutrition thing. It was definitely, stress and all of that added up. But I decided I needed a change. And then I also simultaneously realized that my patients were okay, but they weren't. I noticed nobody was ever really getting off of medication, even patients that came to me from elsewhere. Just nobody was ever getting off of medicines or changing that status quo. So the combination of that led me to really want to change the way that I treated myself and the way that I treated my patients and wanting to see transformation. And so I worked on that for me, lost 30 pounds, changed every aspect of my life. And then, started to bring that to my patients. But, the current medical system does not allow for that type of coaching, which I didn't realize was coaching at the time. So, they don't mind you doing it, but you need to do it in 10 minutes or less. So I found that wasn't adequate for me. And so I decided to just, find a different way. And so that's where the coaching thing came from. So now I am working on multiple things, but mainly building a coaching program, a group coaching program for women to really step into their wellness in a full way, and it'll be about 16-week program where we'll go through all of the wellness pillars. We'll go through the low carb keto lifestyle and learning how to manage that and how to build that in, but do it simply in a way that they can add to their lives and not have it disrupt their lives. I want them to really thrive and not just survive.
So let me get this straight. You don't own your own family practice, medical practice, do you?
No, not at this point.
Okay. So the coaching practice is what you're doing are you CEO, founder of that practice? How does that work?
Yes, I will be the CEO and founder of that practice. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you're doing this in addition to being a physician.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot of work. Yeah.
It is.
Well, kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it takes leadership skills to step out like that and become an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me about the leadership skills that were required to make that leap.
Well, I always say that I felt like I wasn't a leader, but I guess I was. I guess we're all natural leaders as physicians. And I actually was chief resident in residency. And when I think about that now, I'm like, that was where that probably started. In med school, I was kind of, introvert. Well, I've always been introverted, but I didn't speak up a lot initially. But as I got my bearings and got my confidence, I was able to really leverage my skills and learn that there were things I had to offer. And then after, being in practice for so long, even though you're not in a leadership role per se in the organization, you develop these skills. So you have to organize a staff. You have to know what you want your staff to do. You have to be a servant in leadership. You have to be able to put yourself aside and be able to help build up your team and know what they need to make them thrive. And part of that comes in also as a physician, feeling a lot of weight on ourselves and knowing what kind of things would help us to thrive. It's like you start to learn, what other people may need to do the work that you need them to do. You learn how to balance a lot of things as a mom and a wife and a mother and all of those things. And so I had to really hone in on all of that to learn how to manage my life and therefore my career. In the pandemic, networking is also a big part of leadership that I had to learn to hone in on. I have met so many wonderful physicians and other people just like yourself through technology. I have massively expanded my network just by being open to things like this and just jumping on Clubhouse and all of that. So I feel like those are leadership skills as well, with speaking out. I've honed my speaking skills in having a podcast for the past year as well. So there's also that skill that comes along with leadership.
Tell me again, I would like to put it in the chat. You said something about learning what others need to thrive. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Okay. As I think I learned it about me and other physicians kind of last, but what I noticed was that as I worked with a lot of different staff, in primary care, staff is, there's a rapid turnover pretty much no matter where you are. It's kind of unusual nowadays to see a staff that's been the same for 20, 30 years. So you have to work with a lot of different people. You have to work with a lot of different personalities, people coming from different walks of life, different levels of skill. And so you have to kind of know what they're capable of and push them to the limits of that, but without making them feel like inferior, feel like they're not doing things right. And that's a very hard balance. A lot of times everybody has different, things that they need. We all have different love languages. We all have different things that motivate us. And so if you have someone that's not motivated by money or by gifts or things like that, you've got to find a different way to motivate them. So if you know that they really enjoy being affirmed, you have to find ways to encourage them, instead of just always telling them what they're doing wrong, try to find ways to tell them something they're doing well. As a physician in a high intensity setting, family practice and primary care is pretty low key, but there's a lot going on, a lot of decisions being made. I found that things that would have really made me feel better in that position would be being, affirmed and feeling like I was doing something well or right. And I did get that indirectly sometimes. You would have a colleague say, "Oh, she's such a great doctor," and things like that. And it's not that we sit around and like need our ego stroked, but you just sometimes need that language to help you understand that you're doing things right and doing things well. And I found that as a as I transitioned out of that position, the biggest motivator in that realm was my patients. They told me, how wonderful things had been, how I listened to them, how they really didn't want a new doctor. And, those were things that really helped me to see what I needed, but also what to give to those around me that I work with.
That's fantastic. I like that. Just learning how to be more affirmative with them. Yeah. I talk about this a lot on social media about learning to speak the language that helps them feel valued. And you just narrowed it down in such, just
thank you.
Affirm them.
Yeah.
I like that. I really do like that. And I'm sure you learned even more leadership skills as you started doing this. What are your 3 favorite leadership skills?
My 3 favorite, well, like I mentioned earlier, being able to come from a place of servitude. And so that's not being a doormat or being, a pushover, but that's being able to have a servant heart, being able to jump in and help out, being able to, add to things, but also being able to take feedback. Something I often did with my medical assistants was, saying, hey, if there's things that you feel need to be different to help you do your job better, it goes back to that affirming thing, but more so those tangible things that, okay, I'm doing my paperwork this way and this drives her crazy. So I tell them, if there's things that will work better, then let me know and we can talk about it. And so to me, that's that servant heart of letting them have a role too, and not just having it be about me. Of course, you want it to be about your patients too. We have to be servants in a way to our patients. So finding that way, and that's not always easy, finding a way to be a servant at heart with them. The second thing I'd say that I've honed in on for me personally is, like I mentioned, my speaking, being able to speak out, being able to speak up. Those are 2 totally different things, but that they're both important and they tie in together. On my podcast, I've been able to do both. And in leaving medicine in the way that I have, I haven't completely left, but in changing it, I'm able now, I have the freedom to speak out and speak up more than I could before. So that's another thing, being an example of, speaking out and letting people know what's right and what's wrong and how things can improve. And then I'd also say just, being able to care for yourself is part of leadership. It's just like anything else we do. If we can't fill our own cup and we can't have our cup filled, then we can't fill anyone else's cup. And so to be an effective leader, you really do have to care for yourself, because if you're giving everything to your team and everything to your patients and everything to your family and everything to everybody all the time, there's not much left for you. And then you're left exhausted and just not have some days that just aren't so great. Whereas when I start the day and I pour into myself, I'm a better leader after all.
That's fantastic. Those are excellent ones. I actually think what that's for, I would count servitude and the ability to take feedback as 2 separate ones. Yeah. So I would count that as 4. And those are 4 excellent guidelines for the rest of us in leadership. They really are. And I've only recently started doing a better job of taking care of myself. My stepdaughter's moved back in with us, and she has pointed out repeatedly that I never make myself a priority, and I need to start doing that. So absolutely, I've really taken a hard look at that one recently. So yeah. What are qualities that you've seen in people in leadership positions that you would like to not see? Things that you don't like about some of the leaders that you've worked with, things that you think are very negative things that you would like to abolish from leadership positions?
There's a few. We can always think of the negative things, right? But I think that the first thing that popped in my head when you said that was like a dictatorship. Any organization, any business, any practice, anything where you're working with other people, dictating to people just never works. It's never a good thing. And, you know, as physicians, we do have to be able to give orders, and we do have to know what we want, because sometimes lives are on the line. So you have to be able to say, hey, I need this done, and I need this done right now. But learning how to do that and how to do it in a way that is respectful and doesn't make people feel less than. So that is definitely, you know, one that I have not enjoyed in my career. The second one is being kind of in a silo, really not understanding people's positions and their plight. And I've been guilty of this before too. You know, before I was a mom, I really didn't understand the staff members that had to go home and had to pick up their kids and had to do that. And especially now as a single mom, you know, even though I was raised by a single mom for a while, I just didn't fully get that. I didn't understand the burden that can be when you're trying to have a career. So understanding other people's situations, putting yourself in people's shoes is very important. When you can't do that or you won't do that, people can't connect to you, and they don't want to work for you, or if they do, they don't enjoy it, and then the work suffers. So I think that that's important as well. And then I think, and that's really like a compassion thing, right? Like, you know, really understanding and trying to be understanding of what other people are going through. And then I would say, you know, being able to motivate, you know, people that just say, okay, just do your job. Here's more, here's more, here's more, here's more. And not taking the time to really think about, it's similar to compassion, but not thinking about what all that person what you've given them to do. Well, if you give them 5 things to do, and then you add another 5, and then now we're, you know, they're insubordinate or they're not a good worker. You really have to be open to understanding yourself enough to look back and say, okay, is this too much? Every time I add something, am I adding too much? Am I doing, you know, too much to my my staff or my organization by adding this in? And I think that's missing in a lot of leaders I've worked with, where there's just not this, you know, there's no idea of it, or if they do understand it, they kind of don't care.
When you're leading an organization and you've got a job that needs to be done, who do you give it to? You give it to the person who's most successful at getting it done, and that is usually the person with the most on their plate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what can those of us who are in medicine do to encourage more diversity in leadership in medicine and in entrepreneurship in medicine? How can we support that?
You know, I think there's a lot that goes into this. I think we have to go beyond just hiring them. We have to give them, you know, and I've heard this before, but I think it's so important. We have to let them sit at the table, but also let them speak up. Because a lot of times we're present. A lot of times we're there. We're in the, you know, we're in the roles. We're in the, you know, the little pictures that go up on the website, but we're not adding to the organization. And if we are, there's these, again, silos of, you know, things. There's the diversity council. There's this, there's that. But there's not a truly inclusive nature of things. So I think we need to stop looking at it as, okay, I'm bringing them in. I have Black physicians or people of color, physicians of color in my organization, but really having them be a part of it and a prominent part. Something that I have noticed is that, you know, especially when I left, and this isn't, you know, saying anything about the organization I was a part of, but just in general, that it is not well known, you know, where the Black physicians are. And it's kind of a controversial subject because we say, you know, everybody should want to see every doctor, but we know that there are some healthcare disparities. And in a lot of ways, Black patients are more comfortable with Black physicians sometimes. And I think that there's a lot of reasons behind that. But I found that I wasn't aware of who was around and where. And so I think if our patients can't find us, then the organizations aren't going to be able to find us either. And so we have to be making that more visible, making that something we're proud of because of the situation we're in. If we were in a very diverse, openly diverse, happily getting along society, then we wouldn't need that. But since we don't have that, we really need to lift up those that have been oppressed in the past.
Well, one thing that got me was I was sitting in the MEC one time and somebody spoke up and someone else says, well, we put you on this committee, but we didn't actually expect you to speak. Like, what?
Exactly.
What did you expect?
Exactly. Yeah.
And if it happened in MEC, it probably happened in every other committee in the hospital as well.
Yeah.
Somebody looked at me and said, Nan, you're speechless. I'm like, why aren't you?
Yeah.
This has to stop. So, yes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I have a podcast like this.
Yeah. I mean, as you probably experience, a lot of times when you start to speak up, things start to happen, you know, and it's just, it's the very subtle things, but it's just like, you know, like, I don't think that was well received. And then, you know, you don't know if it's something you did or something you didn't do. And it just becomes a whole thing. And it's like, well, if we're not going to encourage conversation and communication, then why have a diverse anything? Because you're right. It's like the illusion of diversity. It's not.
Right. It's not actual diversity.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it has been a pleasure having you on here today.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best with your coaching business.
Thank you.
Which I think will only mean better things for your physician practice, your medical practice. Absolutely. I really do.
Yep.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you for having me on.
Do you have any last comments you'd like to make?
You know, I just say that, you know, I always tell people to build their own table. I mean, I know you've been doing some of that. I see a lot of physicians doing that. I think it is the most amazing thing. A lot of people are afraid because a lot of us are walking away from medicine in the traditional sense. But I think that it's for the good. I think that a lot of physicians can do some real great work outside of the exam room. And while some of our colleagues continue in the exam room, of course, we need them as well. But I think that, you know, if you're a physician on the fence and you're thinking about it, you know, take the leap. And then, you know, we have so many skills and so many degrees and certifications. You can certainly go back to what you were doing if you don't enjoy it. But if you see a way to really help people in a more meaningful way, to lead people in a more meaningful way, by all means, you know, to just take that leap.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. Thank you so much for being with us today, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kamilah Williams. Thank you again for joining us today on Leadership and Diversity in Medicine. We are here every Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm sorry, Eastern Time is not necessarily standard. 1 p.m. Central Time, noon Mountain Time, and 11 Pacific. We'll see you again next Wednesday. Thank you so much. We hope you got value from this.